Welcome to another live lifestyle entrepreneur podcast. My name's Graham Brown. Today we're talking about The $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau, which is one of three books I recommend for lifestyle entrepreneurs. Those three books are The $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau and The 7-Day Startup by Dan Norris and The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And you could throw in there maybe Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Those are the three, maybe four books which I believe are the key foundations for really carving out what the philosophy and the modus operandus of the lifestyle entrepreneur is. So I want to talk a little bit about Chris Guillebeau's book because it's it's not really a business book per se. It's a book which talks about business, but not in a business way. It's very different from a lot of startup books, very different from a lot of textbooks about marketing. It's just a bunch of stories, really. So let's talk about stories. I'll talk about my story, and then I'll talk about Chris Guillebeau's story, and then some of the stories in this book. And as we're live on Facebook, if you are listening in, whether you're listening in live or you're listening to this on the archive, because this stays on the Facebook page forever, then don't forget to like, add your comments, and so on. So let's talk about being a lifestyle entrepreneur, because this is what the $100 Startup is all about. I'll start off with my story, which I suppose is a very traditional story of starting a business. I started my first business 20 years ago. Didn't have a clue how to start a business. What do you do when you don't know how to start a business? Is you go to somewhere like some business center, and every city in the world has them, which are run by local governments or some quasi-governmental organization. And they'll tell you how to start a business. And it's kind of like going to the careers library at school, where you go and there's just lots of dusty folders which you have to read through. And it's a bit like that starting a business. And I went there and I had my free consultation. And the guy in a suit, because he's always in a suit, because that's what business people wear, right? So this guy in the suit sits me down and says, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know. I want to start a business and I'm pretty good at computers and I think I can make computers and design websites." And he sort of scratched his chin a little bit and said, "Okay, well, I think you need a business plan." And it made me sort of realize is that whatever my answer was, his stock answer to that would have been, you need a business plan. So he gave me some software, which is back in those days was a CD, which you stick into your computer and you have to fill out all this stuff. And you have to write your business plan as a part of this software. One of the things you have to do is you have to forecast out 5 years in advance. Like, what is my business going to be in 5 years? And here's me wanting to start my first business. I didn't have a clue what my business was going to be like in 5 years. I mean, how would I know what the revenue forecast would be, what my profit and loss statement would be? I didn't even know how to write my own balance sheet, let alone forecast that 5 years in advance. But this guy says, this is what you need to do. You need to write a business plan. You need to forecast 5 years in advance. And then, when you're done, you can go to a bank and raise some money. And being older and more experienced than me, I assumed everything he said was correct. And I think this is kind of like what we face today. Whenever we start a business, people think this is the way you have to start a business. You have to write a plan. You have to go and raise money. So this is what I did. I wrote a plan, which took me a couple of weeks. And then the next thing was to go and raise some money, which was, go to the bank. So I have to dress up, have a shave, wear a suit, tie, go to the bank manager, sit across the bank manager on the other side of the table and explain what the hell I wanted to do with my business. And there's this guy, and bear in mind, this is 1997. And there's this guy who maybe, he was in his 50s and maybe his daughter had told him something. There was this thing called the internet and he had heard about AOL and Netscape Navigator. And there was me, half his age, sitting across from the table saying I wanted to design websites. And he looked at my plan and said, "Well, I'm not sure we can lend you some money because you don't have any machines or equipment." "What kind of equipment do you need?" "Well, I need a computer." "And what else?" "Well, maybe some kind of furniture in the office." "Okay, well, how big's your office?" And basically he went through this whole process of trying to understand my business in the context of all these very traditional business that he had seen before him, because I just didn't fit into a box. And I'd went to this business plan with a friend of mine who was an investment banker from one of the biggest investment banks in the world, Nomura. He was a qualified chartered accountant. You know, he had 15 plus years of practice. And he sat there, he gave them all the numbers, he gave them, you know, a great presentation. And the bank manager just scratched his head and said, yeah, we're not sure. I don't think we can lend you the money. And the reason is because I didn't fit into the mold. I wasn't a traditional business. So they basically sent us away, told us to get on with it. And that was it. That was my experience of trying to start a business a traditional way. And that didn't work. And I think that's what a lot of people experience when they start a business. They think they have to write a plan and go and raise some money, because that is what we've been taught for 50, 100 years, how to build a business, right? You've got to write a plan. What I want to show you today, I mean, in the $100 startup, I'm not going to talk for too long, 10, 15 minutes, but just to give you some of the key points from the $100 startup. And I think what comes clear from the $100 startup, the 7-day startup, and the 4-hour work week is that you don't need to write lengthy plans. Your plan can be, at most, 1 page. You know, your plan should really be at most 1 page. I didn't even write a business plan for my last businesses. The plan was in my head. So the actual plan that Chris Guillebeau uses in his $100 startup, and you can get his documents. If you buy the book, I think you can get access to these documents online. He basically talks about this 1-pager, which I think is absolutely enough. And there's a reason for that. And I'll come to that in a minute. Let's talk about Chris Guillebeau. Chris Guillebeau, the author of the $100 startup, he isn't a traditional business person by any margin. He started a project called The Art of Nonconformity, which is basically his blog of him traveling the world. And he traveled to about 300 countries. I think he traveled to every country in the world. Well, I say 300 because I don't know how many countries there are in the world, but he traveled to a lot. He went to all of them and he documented his journey. And as a part of that journey, he met a lot of people. And one of the things you learn when you're traveling, and this is why I love travel, is when you're out there on the road, you're kind of vulnerable and exposed, but you're also very open to new ideas. And you don't carry any of the baggage and the bullshit that we have in normal day-to-day lives. And that's why places like Chiang Mai and Thailand are just these fantastic hubs of entrepreneurial energy, because there's a whole bunch of people who have opted to get off their ass, pick up a backpack and go and live in Thailand for a year. And when you bring all those people together without the bullshit of living in their traditional homes and traditional neighborhoods, the magic happens. So that's what you learn when you're on the road. And Chris Guillebeau met a lot of people whilst he's traveling. And what he learned from his travels was that, there was this whole sort of generation of what he calls the accidental entrepreneur. And this is what I call the lifestyle entrepreneur. So the accidental entrepreneur is basically somebody who's doing what they're doing because they want to fix a problem, rather than they're doing what they're doing because they want to become a super successful entrepreneur. They're doing it because they're trying to solve a problem which they've faced or somebody like them has faced in their everyday life. And this is a key part of Chris Guillebeau's book. And I think if there's one message I want you to take away today from this podcast, it's this, is that if you want to be successful as a lifestyle entrepreneur, focus on usefulness and not innovation. And this comes back to the whole idea of starting a business for less than $100, because innovation is sexy, it's exciting, it's the next billion-dollar app, it's expensive. If you want to build the next virtual reality app, you don't just have to build the app. You need a team of developers, a team of testers. You need, millions of users. And the cost of that is starting in the millions, right? That kind of business. It's an expensive business. So innovation is very expensive. However, usefulness is very different. And that's how you can start a business for less than $100. If you want to start a business very cheap, low risk, fast, then focus on usefulness. So what is usefulness? And this is a key message from the book, $100 Startup. And I believe it's a key part of becoming a lifestyle entrepreneur. Usefulness basically means solving a problem that people have in their everyday lives. And that is it. That is what's being useful. So for example, if that problem is this person has some kind of skin condition and they're allergic to traditional cosmetics, and maybe you have a solution which is an aloe-based skin cream, that's a useful solution. It's not innovative, it's useful. It's not redefining skincare or cosmetics. If you, for example, are a cyclist, one of the biggest problems you have as a cyclist like myself is climbing hills. Climbing hills is a big problem for cyclists. But if you could show people, like if you could write a book about how to climb hills, that's useful. It's not innovative. You're not inventing an app. You're not redefining cycling, but you're being useful. And here's the thing, you can be very successful being useful. And a lot of the successful entrepreneurs I know are useful. They don't have anything particularly innovative, but it's these guys that are making the most money because they're not running businesses that eat up money like it's going out of fashion. You see, when you have a useful business, let's go back to the skincare. You know, if you're running an aloe-based skincare business and you're solving a specific problem that people like you have on an everyday basis, a frustration, a pain point, it doesn't matter if you don't have an expensive brand. It doesn't matter if you don't have a 24-hour customer helpline. You know, if it's just you, Graham Brown, and an email address, you could even have a Gmail address, right? If you fix that person's problem, if you solve their everyday frustration, it doesn't matter. They don't care. They don't care that you're not a Body Shop. They don't care you're not an Estee Lauder or a Johnson & Johnson. That's cool. They're cool with that because it's you and your story. So when they go onto your website, they see you and your story. So this is my story. This is why I started this skincare brand. And this is how I'm building it. And it's just me. And here I am in my back room with these boxes full of products which I'm shipping to people like you. And it's me packing these boxes in my spare time because I have a job during the day. And in the evening, I'm doing this. And people love that. People love that authenticity. And that's what people are searching for in the modern age. So the point is that if you try and be innovative, then you go down the very expensive road of building a business. You need to raise money. You need to have teams. However, if you focus on usefulness, people forgive you for all the things which traditionally we associated with an untrustworthy business. But today, it's the other way around. People don't want to deal with big businesses. They want to deal with little guys who do it out of their heart, who are going to give them extra service and go way beyond expectations. That's what people want. And that's how you can build a business for less than $100 because you don't need a business plan. You don't need an accountant. You don't need an office. You don't need a team. You don't even need a website. You don't need to spend money on logos. It's just you, your idea, your product, and the people who really need it. And that's really the gist of the $100 startup. And that's really the gist of what it means to be a successful lifestyle entrepreneur. It's focusing on usefulness, rather than innovation. You know, I see a lot. I work a lot with startups. I work a lot with entrepreneurs just starting out, building businesses, whether it's mentoring or whether it's coaching them, or in some cases in the past I've invested in startups. And this is what I found is that, you know, we are under a lot of pressure to become the next Mark Zuckerberg. We think that that is the only model of success. And that is the benchmark by which we measure our success, right? You know, if you're not changing the world, you're not successful. So when you go to these networking meetings, people are always talking about, oh, I've got a game-changing app. I've got a world-changing service. It's bullshit. These people will never be successful because their hit rate, their success rate is so small. Yes, one of them, but 1 out of a million. But it's the guys who are focusing on the usefulness are the ones that will be successful. It's less sexy. It's less ego, but it's more about what the customer wants. And because of that, You don't need all the expensive overhead associated with a traditional business. So hopefully that was useful. No pun intended. What I'll do is I will share with you more insights here on the Barefoot Journal Facebook page. If you have any questions, you can always leave a comment, contact me through the usual channels. I haven't got quite round to doing the Twitter live integration. It's just kind of like, I'm juggling a whole bunch of balls here at the moment, and that's just one extra ball. So maybe next time I do this, I can get Twitter involved as well. That would be fun. But as I said, it's just kind of adding one extra moving part into the formula. But hopefully if that was useful for you, then let me know. And it is useful for you. Thank you very much. Leave your feedback. I will respond to every piece of feedback, and I will see you here again soon for more updates on the lifestyle entrepreneur.